abandoned and left to die in the frozen woods. What these K9 German Shepherds did will break your heart. Scene 1, a landscape of solitude and silent conspiracy. The Bitter Creek National Reserve lay shrouded in silence, its snow-blanketed pines standing like ancient sentinels beneath a brooding grey sky. Winter had claimed the land in full, burying trails, silencing rivers, and draping the forest in a deceptive serenity. To the unknowing eye, it was a postcard of untouched wilderness. But beneath the snow, something darker stirred. Ranger Thomas Grady hung limply against a tree, his body barely clinging to life. Chains wrapped cruelly around his chest and arms, his wrists pinned behind him, blood seeping into the bark where his skin had split from struggling. He was more ice than man now. Lips blue, breath shallow, eyes fluttering between consciousness and oblivion. He wasn't here by accident. Thomas had always been the kind of ranger who asked too many questions. Questions about unauthorized land permits, strange clearings in untouched zones, and missing wildlife. He thought he was protecting the forest, but somewhere along the line he became a threat. They ambushed him 2 nights ago, faces hidden under ski masks, voices muffled but filled with warning. Stop digging. When he didn't, they decided to bury him another way. Now nature watched silently, not even the wind dared whisper. And yet far off in the distance something moved, slow, precise and powerful. Thomas couldn't know it yet, but salvation was already making its way through the snow, guided not by compass or command, but by loyalty, instinct, and the silent calling of something greater than orders. Let me know when you're ready for Scene 2. Scene 2. A desperate struggle for survival. Every breath Thomas Grady took was a battle against the inevitable. The cold was no longer an enemy. It had become a slow executioner, creeping through his veins, numbing his thoughts, stealing pieces of him with every passing hour. His ranger uniform, once a symbol of duty and strength, hung in tatters, soaked in blood and melted snow. The iron chains biting into his chest felt heavier with each heartbeat, pulling him down as if the forest itself was claiming him. It had been 2 days. 2 days of darkness and solitude. 2 days of bitter wind tearing at his exposed skin. 2 days since those masked men had chained him here to die, not quickly, but slowly, painfully, forgotten beneath the unrelenting snow. His mind drifted in and out, visions of his cabin, his radio crackling with static, the faces of people who trusted him, all slipping away like breath on glass. The worst wasn't the pain, it was the isolation, the humiliating helplessness of being left like prey in a place he had spent decades protecting. He whispered hoarsely to the empty woods, "Is this how it ends?" But nature did not answer, until there faint, a crunch, a shift in the snow. Hallucination? Another cruel trick of his dying mind? His swollen eyes strained against the blinding white landscape. Shapes, moving low, steady, silent. Not men, not hunters. Dogs, German Shepherds. Their coats were dusted with frost, their movements impossibly controlled. No chaos, no panic, they were trained, purposeful, and leading them, a scarred alpha with eyes sharp as a blade. Thomas wanted to cry, but no tears came. For the first time in days, hope flickered in his broken chest. He whispered with all the strength he could summon, "Good boys, please, don't leave me." And the dogs did not run. They approached, closer. Their instincts had found what human cruelty tried to erase, a life still worth saving. Sẵn sàng cho scene 3 chưa? Muốn mình viết tiếp không? Scene 3. The fateful arrival of silent warriors. Through the stillness of the forest, 5 shadows moved like ghosts across the frozen ground. They were not lost wanderers, they were not wild beasts, they were warriors, bred from loyalty, sharpened by discipline, driven by something ancient and unbreakable. K9 German Shepherds. They fanned out in calculated formation, an unspoken choreography shaped by countless missions. Their eyes burned with intelligence. Their paws left precise imprints in the snow, untouched by fear, untouched by hesitation. Leading them was the Alpha, larger than the rest, a scar cutting down over his left eye like a battle-worn crown. His name was Valor. His nose twitched against the icy wind, locking onto the faintest trace of blood and human scent. His golden eyes swept the clearing, and then they found him. Thomas Grady, bound, battered, barely clinging to life. Valor didn't bark. He didn't growl. He approached slowly, deliberately, lowering his head in a gesture that was neither dominance nor threat, but respect. Behind him, the other shepherds spread out, forming a silent perimeter. One sniffed the chains buried in the snow. Another scouted the tree line, ears rotating for unseen threats. A third began pawing at the ground, exposing the rusty padlock that tethered Thomas to the tree. This was no random encounter. This was destiny. These were not just dogs, they were guardians. Thomas, barely conscious, felt the weight of their presence, something ancient stirring in his bones. It was as if the forest itself had summoned them, silent soldiers born not from cruelty but from devotion. And when Valor sat before him, proud, still, unshakable, Thomas felt his heart break and heal all at once. Through cracked lips he whispered a vow to the fading wind, to the dogs who had found him against all odds. Whatever happens, I will not forget you. They had come for him, not by command, but by instinct, by heart, by fate. Scene 4. The silent and miraculous rescue. The forest stood still, ancient, watching, as if it too was holding its breath. Valor moved first. With a low, commanding bark, not of panic but precision, the silent operation began. Two shepherds began digging furiously at the base of the frozen tree, their powerful paws sending shards of ice and snow flying into the bitter wind. Another circled outward, scanning for dangers, his body tense, every muscle honed by training and instinct. Valor's scarred muzzle pressed against the rusted chain that bound Thomas Grady, sniffing, testing, calculating. Thomas, weak, delirious, could only watch through blurred vision. His heartbeat slowed, not from defeat, but from awe. This wasn't chaos. This was strategy. Every movement was deliberate, every action coordinated. One shepherd leapt upward, barking sharply into the wilderness, a signal flare without fire, a voice cutting through the desolation. They weren't barking for fear. They were calling for help. Thomas could feel his own breath turning shallow, the numbness threatening to claim him, but the warmth of hope now pulsed faintly in his chest. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then distant shouts, boots pounding snow, flashlights carving through the darkness of Bitter Creek. A human voice, sharp, desperate, broke through the trees.
I see him, over here.
Handlers, rescuers. The shepherds had done it, but Valor did not move. He stayed rooted before Thomas, his golden eyes locked onto the man he refused to abandon. Not until human hands could take over, not until his mission, ancient, sacred, was complete. Thomas, with the last strength in his battered soul, reached trembling fingers toward the Alpha.
You saved me, he rasped.
Valor leaned his head gently into Thomas's bloodied hand. An unspoken promise. Silent, loyal, forever. And as Thomas faded into unconsciousness, surrounded by snow, by loyalty, by quiet salvation, he knew the forest had not betrayed him. It had sent him warriors. Scene 5, the fragile moment between life and death. Warmth. It was the first sensation that drifted through the fog of Thomas Grady's fractured mind. Not the natural warmth of sunlight, not the gentle heat of a campfire, but the sterile, artificial warmth of survival, hospital lights, humming machines, and clean sheets that smelled of antiseptic and iron. The world returned to him in fragments. A steady beep, his heart still fighting. A dull ache, every bone in his body remembering pain.
And then the weight of memory.
The forest. The chains. The eyes of the shepherd. Thomas forced his dry, cracked voice into the stillness.
The dogs.
The nurse appeared beside him like a quiet ghost, her face softened by relief.
You're safe now, she whispered. They found you just in time.
But Thomas barely heard her. His mind clung to one thing, the silent warrior who refused to leave him. Where are they? Her lips curved into a knowing smile. They're outside, waiting for you. Outside the window, against a backdrop of swirling snow, the silhouettes of the K9 unit stood like sentinels. But one figure sat closest. Valor, the scarred Alpha, unmoving, unwavering, loyal beyond reason. Thomas felt something break within him, not pain, but gratitude so fierce it hurt deeper than any wound. Later, When Sheriff Dalton entered with heavy boots and heavier news about the men who had left him to die, Thomas listened. But his eyes strayed again and again to the doorway. And when Valor padded in, head low, eyes ancient, and pressed his body against the bed like an unspoken vow of protection, Thomas whispered words not meant for anyone else.
I should have died out there.
His hand found the rough fur of the dog's neck.
But you wouldn't let me.
And in that fragile moment, hovering between life reclaimed and death escaped, a bond was sealed, not of command, not of ownership,
But of something rarer.
chosen loyalty, unbreakable.
Forever.
Scene 6. The reunion and the miraculous bond. The snow outside the ranger station had quieted. A soft, endless white stretching over the wounded forest like a blanket of forgiveness. But inside, something extraordinary was unfolding. Thomas sat upright for the first time since his rescue, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his bruised hands shaking slightly. Not from pain now, but from something deeper, expectation. Rachel Vance, the canine handler, stood at the doorway, her voice quiet with awe. He's been waiting for you, hasn't left that spot since we brought you back. Thomas didn't need to ask who. He already knew. Slowly, with the weight of a man reborn, Thomas shifted his legs over the edge of the bed.
And then he saw him.
Valor, the scarred German shepherd, sitting at attention just beyond the infirmary threshold, his eyes never once leaving Thomas, as though memorizing every breath, every heartbeat. Thomas whispered, "Come here, boy." For a moment, silence. Then Valor rose, not with the cautious steps of a wary animal, but with the steady grace of a soldier returning to his commander. Each step echoed louder than any word spoken. When the dog reached him, Thomas extended a trembling hand. Valor pressed his head firmly into Thomas's palm, the weight of that simple touch breaking down every barrier Thomas had built over years of solitude, duty, and loss. Rachel's voice quivered behind them. He's never done this before. Not since he lost his partner. Thomas swallowed hard, feeling the tremble in Valor's body, not from fear, but release.
You didn't just find me, Thomas whispered, tears burning hot against the frost of memory. You saved me.
For a long moment, man and dog stayed like that, a fragile reunion sealed by scars, seen and unseen. And in that stillness, in that room heavy with history and quiet miracles, something wordless passed between them. A promise, not of command, not of obedience, but of trust. Two broken souls, one unbreakable bond, forged not by fate, but by choice, forever. Scene 7. Unveiling the heartbreaking truth and the web of crime. The peaceful silence of the ranger station was nothing but an illusion, like fresh snow hiding poisoned roots beneath. Thomas sat in the operations room, the glow from the old desk lamp casting long shadows across the scattered evidence files. Rachel stood beside him, her face pale, holding a thin manila folder that could shatter everything.
This, she whispered, this changes everything.
Inside the folder, forged permits, fake signatures, falsified trail reports. Names Thomas trusted for years were all here, tied to illegal logging contracts, poaching cover-ups and bribes traded for silence. But what cut deepest was the signature approving the access to Sector 12. It wasn't his, it was Sheriff Dalton's. Thomas clenched his jaw, betrayal twisting in his chest like a knife. "He set me up!" Rachel nodded grimly. "Dalton sold this forest piece by piece to criminals. You were just the last obstacle." The weight of years collapsed on Thomas's shoulders, the man who taught him how to survive in these woods, who shared campfires and hunting stories, had left him chained to die like an animal. But the horror didn't end there. Rachel pulled up the reserve's old patrol logs. This wasn't random. The men who ambushed you knew patrol patterns, emergency dead zones. They had maps that only someone inside the department could provide. Thomas's heart sank deeper. This wasn't just greed. It was a network, a well-organized, well-funded operation, trafficking wildlife, stealing protected timber, laundering dirty money through land deals. And he had been right in the middle of it, blind. Behind him, Valor lay quietly, but his sharp eyes watched every movement. The dog knew. He had sensed the rot long before any human. Thomas whispered bitterly, "We weren't fighting poachers." Rachel finished his thought, her voice hollow. We were fighting ghosts, wearing the badges of friends, and now there was no turning back. Not for Thomas, not for Valor. It was war.
And they were ready.
Scene 8. The deadly pursuit and the battle for survival in the snowy night. Night had fallen like a hunter's snare, cold, silent, and merciless. The Bitter Creek forest was drowning in a storm of snow, its ancient pines standing like frozen sentinels. But Thomas Grady wasn't hiding anymore. Not tonight. Because somewhere in that white abyss, death was hunting him. Heavy boots crunched through the snow behind him. Voices echoed in the wind, harsh, cruel, filled with the arrogance of men who believed this forest belonged to them. Find him, finish it. Their shadows flickered through the trees, armed, masked, moving like ghosts. But they didn't know the forest like Thomas did, and they didn't have Valor. The scarred German shepherd moved beside him like a phantom, silent, focused, his breath coming in steady bursts despite the wound on his leg. His eyes, fierce and alive, burned with loyalty and fire. Thomas crouched low behind a fallen log, scanning the tree line. His radio was dead. No backup, no way out, except forward. Valor's ears twitched, a warning. The hunters were closing in. Thomas whispered, "We fight." When the first attacker appeared, a dark figure with a raised rifle, Valor lunged like a shadow unchained. The snow exploded around them as man and dog collided with brutal force. Thomas surged forward, wielding a makeshift spear carved from a fallen branch. Every strike was for survival, for every betrayal carved into his skin, for every lie buried in this forest. Gunshots split the night. Thomas rolled behind cover, heart pounding. Valor didn't falter. Even injured, he fought with the savage precision of a soldier who had nothing left to lose but his master. Minutes blurred like hours. But when the snow settled, silence returned. The bodies of the ambushers lay sprawled across the forest floor, weapons scattered, their breath stolen by the mountain's cold justice. Thomas knelt beside Valor, bloodied but alive.
"You stayed with me," he whispered hoarsely.
Valor pressed his head into Thomas's chest, a vow without words. Tonight they survived.
But the war wasn't over.
The storm had only just begun. Scene 9. Sacrifice, blood, and the instinct to protect. Until the end, the forest had turned crimson. Not from the sunset, but from blood. Thomas staggered through the snow-covered ravine, his breath ragged, arms shaking from exhaustion and wounds. Behind him, Valor limped, battered, bleeding, but unyielding. The scarred German shepherd was no longer just a trained canine. He was something greater, something ancient and primal, a guardian. But their enemies were relentless. From the shadows emerged the last group of armed men, the most dangerous of them all, cold, methodical, faces hidden beneath black masks. These were not mere poachers or hired guns. These were executioners sent to erase everything. Thomas knew he couldn't outrun them. Not anymore. He turned, planting his boots in the snow, raising his last weapon, a rusted axe stained with frozen blood. His voice was a whisper meant for Valor alone. "This ends here, boy, together." But Valor didn't stay behind. As the first bullet ripped through the air, the dog leaped in front of Thomas, a wall of muscle, fury, and loyalty. The shot hit, not his heart, but his side. Blood splattered across the snow like falling petals. And yet, Valor didn't stop. He crashed into the nearest attacker with bone-breaking force, his teeth clamping down in a final savage defense. Even bleeding, even dying, his only thought was to protect the one he chose.
Thomas roared, swinging the axe in wide arcs, fighting like a man with nothing left to lose. The world narrowed to survival, to loyalty written in scars and blood.
By the time reinforcements arrived, Rachel's unit charging through the woods, the ground was littered with broken bodies. Thomas dropped to his knees beside Valor, the dog's breathing shallow, eyes flickering like fading stars.
"You saved me again," Thomas whispered, his voice cracking.
Valor's tail thumped, weak but defiant. Even now, with life slipping away, he guarded his human, because that was who he was. A protector, until his very last breath. Scene 10. An open ending and the eternal oath between man and dog. Snow kept falling, softly, endlessly, like the world itself was morning. Inside the small ranger station, a fragile silence settled. Thomas sat beside Vala's resting body, the scarred warrior now sleeping peacefully after surviving the impossible. Bandages wrapped his wounds, monitors traced his slow but steady heartbeat. Outside, the forest stood untouched, ancient, vast, and sacred. Rachel entered quietly, placing a folded document on the table beside Thomas.
"Official transfer papers," she whispered. "Vala is no longer government property. He's yours now, your partner, your family."
Thomas didn't speak. His hand rested gently on Vala's neck, feeling the rhythmic pulse beneath the fur. It wasn't just about ownership. It was about something deeper, older than words, a bond written in blood, trust, and sacrifice. Looking out the frost-lined window, Thomas whispered the vow that had taken shape in his heart long before papers made it official. "I swear by it, I'll protect you, old friend, for as long as I draw breath, as long as this forest stands, we survive together." Vala stirred, his eyes fluttering open, amber and burning with quiet strength. His tail thumped against the floor, a silent promise in return. Beyond them, the world remained dangerous. Evil still hid in shadows. Corruption still ran through the veins of men. But none of that mattered tonight. Because a man and his dog, two souls forever scarred, forever bound, had found each other in the heart of darkness. And together, they would never be lost again. Not while loyalty still breathed. Not while love still endured. Not while their oath remained unbroken.
Forever.
Epilogue. And the forest will remember their footsteps. Long after the snow melted, long after the wounds became scars, legends began to whisper their names. In the forgotten corners of Bitter Creek National Reserve, where the pines stood like ancient guardians, the story of Thomas Grady and Vala was carried by the wind. The lost ranger who refused to die, the battle-scarred dog who defied fate. Locals would say they had seen them, walking the mist-covered trails at dawn. A man with quiet eyes. A German shepherd moving like a shadow beside him, protective, alert, unbreakable. Some called them ghosts.
Others called them guardians.
But those who truly knew called them family. And somewhere deep in the wilderness, beneath the canopy of 1,000 silent witnesses, new paw prints joined theirs. Small, unsteady, but destined for greatness. The next generation, born from loyalty, raised in courage, forged in sacrifice. For danger never truly sleeps, for evil always waits. But so long as one man still walks the forest with a heart bound to his dog, and so long as the echoes of their oath remain in the wind, there will always be hope. There will always be warriors without fear.
And there will always be stories
Of a man and his dog standing together where the wild runs free, where loyalty is eternal,
and where love never dies.